Well, a technical glitch in the first primary race of the 2020 election caused a full-fledged meltdown in Iowa, with still no winner called, still no winner. So could this disaster signal the end of caucusing altogether? Here to debate is Democratic strategist Laura Fink and Florida GOP congressional candidate Ford O'Connell. Thank you both for joining us. We certainly appreciate it.
Good to be here.
So let's talk about that as we bring up the results. Now we have 71% of the precincts reporting. We have Pete Buttigieg slightly leading Bernie Sanders, followed by Warren, and then Biden. He's way down there at fourth with about, 15.43%. Ford, what's your take on what happened?
Well, I think that Iowa was a complete and unmitigated disaster for the Democrats. It's pretty hard for them to argue that they should be put in charge of the country when they can't even run their own caucus. It was a very big victory for President Trump. He had a turnout incumbent record for a presidency, and the Democrats are engaged in chaos and infighting. If Iowa wants to maintain its first-in-the-nation status, it should probably go to a closed primary system rather than an outdated caucus, because it cuts down on human error, technological glitches, and, frankly, partisan pranks.
Yeah, Laura, what about that? Should Iowa maintain their first-in-the-nation status? I mean, it wasn't Iowa's fault, really. It was the DNC and this app.
Well, and there apparently is not an app for that. But I will say that much like Patrick Mahomes, they're going to come through in the fourth quarter, and we should see Iowa settling in. But I must agree with one sentiment, and that is that the caucus system is certainly outmoded, and that's because it's rather exclusive. You know, if you don't have time to sit in a high school gymnasium for 2 hours on a Monday night, if you're a single mom, if you are a senior, if you're a working person with a couple of jobs, then it's going to be really hard to get there. And it also favors candidates that have, very passionate bases, but maybe not as broad of support. So, and not to mention, there's also a secret, not a secret ballot, which means that if you're in the same gymnasium as your pastor or your boss or maybe even your husband, and you don't want them to know how you're going to vote, that's all taken away from you. So it's time to move past this outmoded caucus system and into something like an open system of voting so that we can maximize participation.
Yeah, it really is interesting, though, to watch people there caucusing back and forth to try to influence other people to vote for their candidate, because that's really ultimately what this is supposed to be about in America. It's supposed to be everyday Americans, putting forth their ideas, who they think should represent them, who they want to throw their support behind. Here's what the DNC chairman, Tom Perez, finally had to say yesterday on what happened in Iowa. He said what happened last night should never happen again. It's clear that the app in question did not function adequately. It will not be used in Nevada or anywhere else during the primary election process. The technology vendor must provide absolute transparent accounting of what went wrong. So he's blaming the app. He's blaming that company for it. But at the same time, DHS, I believe it was, had offered to vet the app and the equipment, but they said no thanks.
Well, I think the Democrats have no one to blame but themselves. The idea that you're going to go into Iowa, which is probably the second most important contest after Super Tuesday, if you're a 2020 Democratic presidential hopeful, and not try out the software, seems a little insane. I will say this. Remember, among Democrats, there is a concern that 2016 was rigged against Bernie Sanders, and you have a feeling that if you have another situation like this in Nevada with a caucus, you may have confusion and chaos again, where you have a lot of different presidential hopefuls on the Democratic side concerned about a tainted process and a rigged system. And that is something the Democrats truly have to guard against.
Yeah. Laura, final word.
So that's laughable. So it's so funny because with an approval rating less than 50%, more people disapprove of this president than approve of him. And that means that the only way that he wins is to arguments like that, to depress turnout by telling Democrats and independents that are anti the president.
You're talking about a general election.
Through division.
Yeah.
Sir, one moment, please. What I'm talking about is division. You're sowing division and you're saying things are rigged. And the only way that Trump wins is if Democrats lose their unity and
Laura,
if they lose their
Okay, wait, we have to go.
Keep on with that argument.
Yeah, we have to go right now, though. But we were talking about division within the DNC, and it was evident that there were a lot of questions last year regarding Bernie Sanders.
But see, you're trying to sow that division.
No. Did you see the State of the Union last night? Did you see Nancy Pelosi ripping up the State of the Union? I mean, I think that's sowing a division. Thank you both for joining us. We're out of time, though. We'll be right back.